Welcome to another episode of TPL Pod. I want you to really picture this. Picture a 14-year-old girl in St. Michael, Barbados.
Right, just a regular teenager.
Exactly. She is standing on the street in the brutal Caribbean heat, helping her father sell clothes out of a makeshift stall. But behind the scenes, her daily life is defined by this terrifying medical mystery.
Yeah, it's a really dark period.
She is suffering from headaches so agonizing, so relentless, that local doctors are running multiple CT scans. They're operating under the assumption that she has a brain tumor. It is a chaotic, deeply frightening way to grow up.
Unbelievably scary.
But so fast forward to today. That same girl is the first female musician to become a billionaire. She is a global fashion mogul who completely shattered industry standards. And, she is a literal government-declared national hero of her home country.
Well, the distance between that street stall in Bridgetown and the boardroom of the world's largest luxury conglomerates is staggering. We are looking at a trajectory that defies almost every statistical probability.
It really does. Today, our deep dive is into the life and basically the architecture of Robyn Rihanna Fenty. If you are listening to this, you already know the voice. You know the stadium anthems.
Obviously, yeah.
But what gets buried under the sheer volume of her chart success is the survival instinct, the shrewd business mechanics, and the relentless reinvention that built her empire. We are looking at how a girl from Barbados systematically shed every single label the music and fashion industries tried to force on her.
And took absolute control.
Exactly, taking absolute control of her own identity to become a cultural titan.
Control is, it's the defining mechanism of her entire narrative, primarily because her childhood was just utterly devoid of it.
Right.
She grew up in this 3-bedroom bungalow, navigating an incredibly fraught home life. Her father, Ronald, was battling severe crack cocaine and alcohol addiction.
Which is so heavy for a kid to deal with.
It is. And Rihanna has spoken openly about the brutal toll this took on the family, including, witnessing her father physically abuse her mother, Monica.
Which brings us back to those debilitating headaches. The doctors were looking for a physical tumor. But the sources point to something entirely psychological, right? It's like her body was essentially acting as a physical barometer, like an emergency alarm for the environment she was trapped in.
That's a perfect analogy. The intense psychological trauma manifested physically as a severe psychosomatic response. Her nervous system was just overwhelmed by the daily volatility of her parents' toxic marriage.
Wow.
And the proof of this mechanism is found in what happened when she was 14. Her parents finally divorced, the immediate environmental threat was removed, and her health improved almost overnight.
Wait, really? Like just instantly?
Yeah, the headaches completely vanished without any medical intervention whatsoever.
That is wild. So once the alarms in her own body finally stopped ringing, she could focus on an escape route. Even before the divorce, I know she was honing her voice. Neighbors in St. Michael actually nicknamed her Robyn Redbreast.
Right, because she was constantly singing Whitney Houston songs into a hairbrush.
Yes. And she even sought out this strict structure by joining the Barbados Cadet Corps when she was just 11.
The Cadet Corps detail is so fascinating to me because it shows this deep desire for discipline amidst the chaos of her home life. And, fun fact, her drill sergeant in the military cadets was actually Chantel.
Oh, who would also go on to become a really successful singer.
Exactly. But while the military drills provided structure, music was her true exit strategy. By the time she was 15, she had formed a girl group with 2 classmates, and they managed to secure an audition with an American record producer named Evan Rogers.
Who just happened to be vacationing nearby with his Barbadian wife, right?
And talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Seriously. And the sources describe this audition as legendary. The trio walks in, they perform a cover of Destiny's Child's Emotion, and Evan Rogers' reaction is deeply telling about the brutal reality of star power.
Oh, for sure.
He later said, the minute Rihanna walked into the room, it was like the other 2 girls didn't exist.
The music industry is incredibly Dorinian in that way. Rogers immediately dismantled the group. He arranged a second meeting exclusively with Rihanna and her mother.
He just knew.
He recognized a rare commodity instantly. He brought her to Connecticut to record demo tapes. And one of the tracks they cut was this dance hall-infused pop song called Ponder Replay.
Okay, so that specific demo tape works its way up the chain until it lands on the desk of Jay-Z, who had, at the time, just taken over as the president and CEO of Def Jam Recordings.
Right.
But Jay-Z's initial instinct was that the song was actually too big for a brand new, unknown artist.
Which sounds weird, right?
Yeah, how is a massive hit a bad thing?
Well, he worried she might be a one-hit wonder, like the sheer scale of the track would eclipse her as an artist. But he invites the 16-year-old girl to New York to audition in person anyway.
So she walks into that corporate office and delivers a live performance of Whitney Houston's For the Love of You alongside her demo tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And the performance fundamentally changes the room's temperature.
Oh, completely.
L.A. Reid, this legendary executive who was also in the room, turns to Jay-Z with a very explicit directive.
Yeah.
He says basically, do not let her leave the building without a signed contract.
They literally kept her waiting in the office for hours while corporate lawyers furiously drafted a 6-album deal.
At 16.
At 16 years old, she moves to the United States and finishes her high school education with a tutor.
But, it is easy to look at a teenager getting signed by Jay-Z and think, wow, she won the lottery. This is a Cinderella story.
Yeah, it definitely gets framed that way.
But the reality is she walked into a corporate factory that produces very specific, highly controlled pop stars. So I have to ask, was she actually an autonomous artist at this point, or just clay being molded by powerful, middle-aged executives?
At that specific moment, she was absolutely being molded to fit a corporate blueprint. The mid-2000s Def Jam strategy for female artists left very little room for autonomy.
They had a formula.
Right. They demanded a safe, accessible, cookie-cutter pop princess who could reliably sell ringtones and physical CDs. And for her first 2 albums, Music of the Sun in 2005 and A Girl Like Me in 2006, she largely played along.
She did.
She blended her authentic Caribbean roots with this highly polished, sanitized pop production.
And the strategy worked financially. SOS goes to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. She's moving millions of units and generating massive revenue for Def Jam. But playing a character that someone else designed has an expiration date.
Especially for her.
Exactly, especially for someone whose entire childhood required this fierce, independent resilience.
She later articulated that the label had engineered this rigid image for her before she even had the chance to figure out who she was as an adult. They boxed her in.
Yeah.
For a young woman who survived her father's addiction and a chaotic household by relying on her own instincts ceding control of her identity to record executives was never going to be a long-term arrangement.
It's like she used the labels machine as a Trojan horse.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
She played the game to get inside the fortress, but once she was in, she completely burned the blueprint and redecorated the place to her own taste. The breaking point comes in 2007. She begins recording her 3rd studio album, and she orchestrates a complete aesthetic and musical rebellion.
Total 180.
She dismisses the girl next door styling entirely and titles the album Good Girl Gone Bad.
The shift wasn't just about pivoting to up-tempo dance tracks either. It was a deliberate visual metamorphosis. She bypassed her management's preferences and chopped off her long hair into this sharp, edgy, asymmetrical bob.
A haircut specifically inspired by Charlize Theron's character in the sci-fi action movie Aeon Flux.
Right.
It was severe, angular, and completely unapproachable in a traditional pop sense.
The aesthetic severity matched the sonic shift. The lead single, Umbrella, just explodes into a global phenomenon. It dominates the charts for weeks, wins a Grammy, and catapults her from a successful roster artist to an undeniable global superstar.
So once she had the leverage of massive commercial success, the executives could no longer dictate her choices. She became the primary architect of her own public image.
Exactly. She took the reins.
But just as she solidified absolute control over her professional trajectory, she faced a horrific, deeply public loss of control in her private life.
Yeah, this is a tough chapter.
The night before the 2009 Grammy Awards, she was physically assaulted by her then-boyfriend, the R&B singer Chris Brown.
The assault forced her to cancel her scheduled Grammy performance, and it ignited an unprecedented media circus. I mean, the violation of her privacy escalated dramatically when the gossip site TMZ obtained and published a leaked police photograph detailing her severe facial injuries.
The cultural noise around this was just deafening. The media and the public immediately tried to cast her in a very specific, sanitized role. They wanted the perfect victim narrative.
Because society operates on a very rigid script for public figures who experience domestic violence.
They do.
The expectation is that the survivor will perform their trauma in a palatable way. Offering graceful, tearful interviews and slowly rebuilding themselves for public consumption.
Right, releasing some uplifting anthem.
Exactly. But Rihanna completely rejected that script. Instead of retreating into a PR-managed apology tour, she went back into the studio just 1 month later and recorded Rated R.
How did pivoting to such dark, vulnerable material change her relationship with the listener? I mean, dropping an album like that right after a trauma.
It essentially killed off the untouchable pop star illusion. By putting out an album that abrasive and dark, she forced the public to look at the messy, angry reality of her situation.
Yeah.
Rated R was heavily rock-influenced, hostile, and fiercely introspective. She channeled the vulnerability and the rage directly into the production. By refusing to hide the ugly parts of her survival, she forged a completely different, deeply, fiercely protective bond with her audience. The fans realized she was not going to curate her life for their comfort.
And the public had a very hard time reconciling that independence, especially when she briefly rekindled her relationship with Chris Brown a few years later in 2013. The media backlash to that decision was intense.
The sources highlight that 2013 reconciliation because it shatters the neat Hollywood character arc people expected.
Right. It's not a movie.
Human trauma and domestic abuse dynamics are incredibly complex. She was navigating the aftermath of severe abuse under a microscopic global lens, and she made it clear she would live her life according to her own flawed human reality rather than adhering to the public's judgment.
Her refusal to apologize for her complexity translates directly into her absolute mastery of reinvention over the next decade.
Oh, her run is unmatched.
It really is. She goes on this commercial dominance spree, releasing albums like Loud Talk That Talk and Unapologetic. She becomes the youngest and fastest solo artist in history to accumulate 10 Billboard #1 singles.
Which is just staggering.
But the true turning point in her business autonomy happens around 2016 with her 8th studio album, Anti.
Up until Anti, she was locked into this relentless, exhausting cycle, releasing a new album almost every single year to feed the label's machinery.
It was nonstop.
But Anti disrupts the traditional record rollout entirely. She releases it exclusively on Tidal, a streaming service she actually co-owns, and puts it out through her own newly minted imprint, Westbury Road Entertainment.
She essentially bypassed the traditional distribution gatekeepers. By owning a piece of the streaming platform and releasing through her own imprint, she controlled the pipeline directly to the listener.
And secured a much larger share of the underlying master rights.
Which is huge.
It's everything. Anti was critically acclaimed, but it also signaled a deliberate deceleration in her musical output. She had conquered the music industry's corporate structure, and she began pivoting those strategic instincts toward building a billionaire business empire.
And this pivot requires us to look at the psychology of her brand architecture. When she steps into the corporate boardroom, she deliberately shelves the name Rihanna. She uses her surname, Fenty.
Splitting her identity was a masterstroke of brand protection. Rihanna remains the edgy, provocative, sometimes controversial artist. But Fenty becomes the corporate, inclusive, highly scalable business entity.
It's brilliant.
It really is. This bifurcation allows her to take immense artistic risks without alienating conservative boardroom investors. In 2017, she partnered with LVMH to launch Fenty Beauty.
Okay, make this make sense for me, though. LVMH is Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. They are the ultimate historical gatekeepers of global luxury.
Right?
And the cosmetics industry itself is centuries old and worth billions. You were telling me no major corporation realized there was a massive financial incentive to cater to darker skin tones until 2017.
I know it sounds absurd, but it was a reality born of systemic exclusion masquerading as supply chain logic.
Supply chain logic.
Yeah. Legacy cosmetic brands operated on a deeply stubborn, flawed assumption about return on investment. They assumed that formulating darker foundation shades required expensive research and development that wouldn't sell in high enough volumes to justify the shelf space.
So they just ignored them.
They treated anyone outside a very narrow spectrum of light to medium skin tones as a niche demographic.
So they were just leaving billions of dollars on the table because they didn't want to adjust their manufacturing and distribution processes.
Precisely. Fenty Beauty didn't just fill a gap, it exposed the industry's systemic racism. She launched with 40 distinct shades of foundations simultaneously.
40 shades all at once.
And she didn't just add dark shades as a post-production afterthought. The formulation process took years because she insisted on capturing the correct subtle undertones, the olives, the reds, the cools for every single complexion.
And the legacy brand's excuses completely evaporated when the darker shades of Fenty Beauty sold out almost instantly across the globe.
Exactly. By proving that radical inclusivity was wildly profitable, she sparked a massive industry pivot that business analysts dubbed the Fenty effect. Every major cosmetic brand was suddenly scrambling to expand their shade ranges just to maintain market relevance.
And then she applied that exact same disruptive logic to the lingerie market the following year. In 2018, she launched Savage X Fenty.
Another massive shakeup.
Right. She looked at a market entirely dominated by narrow, exclusionary sizing standards and introduced radical inclusivity. The marketing featured plus-size models, diverse body types, and accessible sizing, completely upending the industry's traditional beauty standards.
And her success forced the old guard to recognize her as a peer. In 2019, LVMH backed her to launch the luxury fashion brand Fenty. This was a monumental milestone.
Historic.
She became the first woman to create an original brand for the LVMH conglomerate and the first woman of color to lead one of its luxury houses.
We have to circle back to her family, though, because building a billion-dollar global trademark out of her surname brought some deep, unresolved complications to the surface. Her father, Ronald, the same man who brought so much chaos to her childhood, actually attempted to capitalize on the Fenty name himself.
Yeah, the legal documents reveal a stark collision between her corporate empire and her family trauma. In 2019, she filed a lawsuit against her own father. He had launched an entertainment company called Fenty Entertainment, and the lawsuit alleged he was actively misrepresenting his company as being affiliated with her, which of course was commercially confusing and damaging the Fenty beauty brand.
Taking your own father to federal court over the trademark of your shared last name is incredibly heavy. It is a harsh reminder that accumulating $1 billion in net worth does not magically erase complex family dynamics.
No, it doesn't. She ultimately dropped the lawsuit in 2021, likely settling the matter privately, but it underscores the immense boundaries she has had to enforce to protect the empire she built.
Over the last few years, those boundaries seem to have created space for her to build a new family on her own terms. She stepped back from the relentless touring cycle, began a relationship with the rapper ASA Rocky, and they have since welcomed children together.
But her shift toward motherhood didn't diminish her cultural gravity. It just changed how she deploys it. The ultimate proof of her enduring relevance is the 2023 Super Bowl Alva Live halftime show.
The context leading up to that performance is vital, because returning to the Super Bowl was a highly calculated decision, seeing as she had previously instituted a hard boycott of the NFL.
Right. In 2019, she publicly turned down the Super Bowl halftime show in direct solidarity with Colin Kaepernick,
supporting his protests against racial injustice and police brutality.
Exactly. She refused to lend her cultural capital to an organization she felt was blacklisting a peaceful protester.
So for her to agree to perform 4 years later, she had to ensure it was executed entirely on her terms. She didn't just walk onto the field, she was suspended high above it on a floating glass platform.
It was an incredible visual.
And she broke a massive cultural taboo by revealing to a global audience that she was pregnant. She became the first person to ever headline a Super Bowl halftime show while pregnant.
And the performance relied entirely on her sheer presence. There were no surprise guest stars, which is highly unusual for the modern Super Bowl. It was just her hovering above the stadium, celebrating her impending motherhood.
And the metrics validated her strategy completely. The broadcast drew over 121 million viewers, officially making it the most watched Super Bowl halftime show in television history.
Throughout all of this unprecedented wealth and global influence, she has also kept a firm grip on her roots in Barbados. In 2012, she founded the Clara Lionel Foundation, naming it after her grandparents.
The foundation's impact is sweeping. They have deployed millions of dollars to fund climate justice initiatives across Caribbean nations. They coordinated major COVID-19 relief efforts, and they finance emergency preparedness programs globally.
Her philanthropic impact and her elevation of Barbadian culture on the world stage prompted the government of Barbados to appoint her as an ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary.
And then in 2021, when Barbados officially severed ties with the British monarchy and transitioned to a republic, Prime Minister Mia Mottley took the ultimate step, officially declaring Rihanna a national hero.
It is the highest honor a nation can bestow. It cements her legacy not just as an entertainer, but as a foundational pillar of her country's modern identity.
Think back to the 14-year-old girl in Bridgetown. A chaotic home life, surrounded by addiction and abuse, suffering from stress-induced headaches, so severe they mimicked a brain tumor.
It's a long way from there.
She survived that pressure cooker and grew up to architect a life where she holds unquestioned control. She redefined what it means to be a modern icon by simply refusing to let anyone else write her script.
Truly.
When a record label tried to keep her in a safe pop box, she chalked her hair and went dark. When a ravenous media tried to cast her as a tragic victim, she released an abrasive rock album. When the legacy beauty industry ignored millions of people, she exposed their lazy supply chains and built a billion-dollar inclusive empire.
She forced every single institution she encountered to adapt to her standards, rather than the other way around.
I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. Consider the absolute brilliance of splitting your identity in two. Rihanna is the untouchable artist, the pop culture provocateur descending from the stadium sky. But Fenty is the welcoming, highly structured, billionaire businesswoman who looks at a fractured world and says, there's a place for everyone here.
It's amazing.
It is a calculated duality that allowed her to conquer the world not just once, but twice. Thanks for listening to Pilot Bell Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.